Okay, so something huge just happened. The Supreme Court has just struck down one of the biggest economic policies of the last decade. A president's signature tariffs? Now illegal. So, what's really going on here? What did these tariffs actually accomplish? And what does this ruling mean for, well, everybody? Let's break it all down. So here's the headline, the big news. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court has ruled that President Trump's sweeping global tariffs are, in fact, illegal. And look, this isn't just some political slap on the wrist. This decision completely dismantles a policy that has been a centerpiece of his administration, one that has literally changed the way goods move around the planet. All right, let's dive right into this Supreme Court showdown. The verdict was pretty decisive. 6-3. The court found that the tariffs violate federal law. This is a huge deal, a direct challenge not just to this specific policy, but really to the administration's whole way of thinking about global trade. But to really get why the court made this move, we got to rewind a bit and look at the tariff plan itself. I mean, what were these things supposed to do in the first place? And what was the legal argument that got them in front of the Supreme Court to begin with? Okay, so the plan was pretty straightforward and really ambitious. It had two main goals. The first was to slap a baseline 10% tax on imports, with the idea of completely wiping out the U.S. trade deficit. And the second, big picture goal was to spark this massive comeback for American manufacturing and bring jobs back home. So how did this whole thing end up at the Supreme Court? Well, that's where things get interesting. See, normally, Congress has the power to set tariffs, but the administration used this kind of obscure emergency law from the 70s to go around them. Right away, businesses and states filed lawsuits, saying it was a massive overreach of presidential power. And now the Supreme Court has said, yep, we agree. And hey, just to make sure we're all on the same page here, a trade deficit is super simple. It's when a country buys more stuff from the world than it sells to the world. And for the U.S., this isn't new. We've pretty much had a trade deficit continuously since 1975. Getting rid of it was goal number one for these tariffs. Now, the administration has been very clear that they think that tariffs have been a huge success. But did the policy actually work? Let's do a little reality check and put the claims right next to the official government numbers. So the administration has been saying this policy is a home run. I mean, this is a direct quote from the president, posted just yesterday, claiming a massive 78% reduction in the trade deficit, all because of the tariffs. That's not just some vague promise, it's a super specific, really bold claim. A massive reduction, right? Well, here's what the administration's own government data says. The trade deficit, it didn't fall. Nope, it actually went up by about 2%. And that 2% might not sound like a lot, but let me put that into perspective for you. The goods deficit swelled to $1.24 trillion. That's not just a little bit more, it's the highest that number has been in 65 years, since 1960. So yeah, on its main objective, the policy didn't just miss the mark, it went in the complete opposite direction. Okay, so goal number one, not so good. What about goal number two, bringing back American jobs? Well, the data shows the opposite happened there too. Instead of a big manufacturing boom, American manufacturers actually cut 80,000 jobs last year. So if the tariffs didn't lower the deficit and they didn't bring back jobs, what on earth did they actually do? Well, it turns out they had a massive and maybe unintended consequence. They totally redrew the map of global trade. And you can see that shift right here in the numbers. In one way, the tariffs did what they were supposed to do. The trade deficit with China, it dropped by 26%. It went down with Europe too. But that deficit didn't just disappear into thin air. It just moved. Take a look at the other side. The deficit with Vietnam shot up 44%. It almost doubled with Taiwan, and it grew a lot with Mexico and India. The imbalance was just rerouted. So what does all this really mean? Well, there are two big takeaways. First, the trade relationship between the U.S. and China, the two biggest economies in the world, is degrading and fast. And second, you have to wonder, if the goal is to fight deficits, are the countries that picked up China's slack, like Vietnam and India, next on the list? You could see a whole new round of trade conflicts starting up. So the Supreme Court drops this bombshell ruling, and suddenly everything's a question mark. This leaves us with three huge unanswered questions about what happens next. First up, the most obvious one. Does this ruling mean the tariffs are just gone for good? You'd think so, but the answer is probably not. Reports are suggesting the White House kind of saw this coming and might already be looking at different laws or executive orders to basically bring the tariffs back in another form. So we definitely can't rule out seeing them again. Okay, question number 2, and it is a big one. What about all that cash? An estimated 250 times billion dollars has already been collected from these tariffs. Who gets that money? Do the businesses that paid it get a refund? And for now, nobody knows. The Supreme Court, in its ruling, basically said, not our problem, and kicked that decision down the road for lower courts to figure out, which means $250 billion is just sitting in legal limbo. And all of this, it brings us to one final, really tricky question. When you start this cycle of tariffs, hitting one country, seeing the trade just shift to another, and then another, in a global economy that's as connected as ours is today, how do you ever find the off-ramp?